Viewers, welcome back to the South Main Auto Channel. Got the 2004 oldie but a goodie Jeep Grand Cherokee. Got the big 4.0 and the money lights on, and his exhaust is loud, and it's got a leaky brake line. And I think that's it. Oh, I see it was due for an oil change too. But I got her getting all decoded here, and we're gonna see what the engine light is, see what that's gonna need. These things are usually pretty rough condition in New York State, especially in 04. So I'm not sure what we'll see. It looks like it's had some brake lines replaced here under the hood. VIN decoding failed, it said. Let me enter this in here manually and we'll see what we have. Well, she's done scanning finally. Took a while. Not many modules on this thing, but what, 10 of them? 10 or 12 or 10, 11 modules. Engine lights on, P0, 161 and 135. Bank 1, sensor 1, heater failure. Bank 2, sensor 2, heater failure. So that's interesting. All right, well, that's good to know. We know on Chrysler products that we often find bad grounds, so I think the next best thing to do here is going to be to get a wire diagram. Let's see if these two have anything in common. We could have just a couple bad O2 sensors, perhaps. But let's see what we need to make this O2 heater work, and then just diagnose it. Alright, it's always on the last diagram, but we did find two sensors. So we're having a problem with 1.1 and 2.2, and on the heater circuit, heater failure. So that's going to be this circuit here where it shows the little heater grid in the O2 sensors. So let's just see. Let's just click on this so we can have an interactive diagram. Albeit not super great through Mitchell, but so that is our ground circuit. It goes over here to G104, but that is for oxygen sensor 2.2 and 1.2. So that's for both downstreams. So that doesn't share the same ground as the 1.1. So we may have just two bad O2 sensors. Let's still figure out how it works. We have a solid ground, and then this has to be the power. Okay, and on this one it just comes straight from a relay. So these are these must just be full-time power. That's interesting. That's interesting because being non-PCM controlled, how in the thunder does it know if the heater circuit's open? It has no way to monitor that. That's interesting. Okay. Typically, if it can check a heater circuit, usually they have to run through the PCM. We should verify our code definition here, 161 and 135. Because I don't know how the PCM can monitor a relay controlled O2 sensor by itself. It's not saying the rear O2 relay circuit, it's saying bank 2 sensor 2 heater circuit failure. It must have another way to determine it. So let's see here. And then bank 1.1. Let's see, because it comes up shares. Let's see where this wire goes. 1.1, that goes to the PCM. So this is, I don't know if it's power side switched or ground side switched at this point. So that's bank 1 sensor 1, bank 2 sensor 1. Probably works in a similar fashion, and it does. That is controlled by the PCM also. All right, so the other wire is either power or ground. We'll be able to figure out that. That's that wire there. We follow that up, and it goes to this relay, and it must be, okay, so that must be power side switch then, or ground side switch, because this is going to be power for the control side of the relay, power on the load side. If we follow this back, it likely goes to a fuse, or at least it must. Oh, and it does. Fuse 16, 15 amp. So we've learned some stuff. Both O2 sensors work differently. The front O2 sensor, heater, is going to have full-time power, ground side switched on this wire. And then the rear O2 is going to have a full-time ground, and then the power is going to turn on and off via the relay. So now that we know that, now we can go do some checking. I am going to look just because I'm curious. It's going to get the best of me is how in the thunder it knows if that rear O2 heater has failed. Perhaps it's looking for, the O2 voltage to change in a certain period of time. Because that's something we're going to need to know, because with these ones here that run through the PCM, that's simple. It looks for power on this wire and on this wire until it pulls the ground. If it doesn't see 12 volts, it can only assume that the heater circuit is open. So that makes sense to me. The other one does not. So I'm going to do a little poking here. But now that we know how this works, we're good. We're in good shape for the shape we're in. I'm going to take and print this out here just so we have it. And let me look up some stuff. So this is pretty interesting. The O2 heater failure determiner in the PCM is not looking for voltage on that control side, even for the upstream O2 sensors where it is controlled by the PCM. It says here when it's monitored over 10 volts, cold start, less than 147 degrees F, engine idling for 12 seconds. In order to set this code, the O2 sensors for the upstreams, mind you, have to be at 3 volts for 30 to 90 seconds. So 30 seconds to a minute and a half. And then it determines if that front O2 is working. Now for the rear, same set criteria, or same monitor criteria, but it sets differently. If the rear O2s stay above 3 volts for a minute to 4 minutes, so 60 seconds to 240 seconds, it then sets the failure for the downstream O2 sensor. So pretty interesting. That is how they check it. Maybe I've just never paid attention to that in the past, so not a big deal. So in theory, we should be able to start this thing and see it. Granted, it's cold. It's only 78 degrees F, but it said it had to be a cold start, right? Below 1 something. I don't know. My memory's pretty short. We can see the O2 heater relay. We can tell if it turns it on, and then we can see the pulse width modulation. So it's going to be that ground side switch for the front O2 sensors, because we determined that they have a full-time power. And these are all sitting at 5 volts right now, key on, engine off, except for 1.2. We're expecting to see a problem with 1.1 and 2.2. These are the ones we expect to see stay high after a few minutes. So let me go ahead and start this thing up. Reach in here. Oh, we're probably gonna have to start this all over again. That's right. Gosh dang it. I'll get her back up there for us. Well, that's a bit of a pisser. It took a few seconds to get this thing back going again. And so we missed it. But needless to say, 1.2 is working, but 2.2 is still hanging pretty high. So it is pretty likely that that rear heater on this one is not functioning. But the other downstream appears that it is. That's reading pretty low voltage. Alright, so that's interesting. The 1.1 appears to be working. Okay, well that's interesting. We probably aren't going to find a problem with make one sensor 1 heater. Chryslers are notorious for their O2 sensors, hanging high or hanging low, so it wouldn't surprise me. But this 2.2 definitely is quite a bit slower to respond. You can see the voltage is still hanging pretty high on it in comparison to its companion. data transfer rate on these old PCMs are pretty slow, so that's why you're not getting a real smooth graph. They transmit data about as fast as what you're seeing in here, so pretty dang slow. That's both your upstreams there. Okay. And then this is our downstreams. Alright, looks like 1-2 is starting to heat up finally. Well, let's check the heater circuit on 2.2. It's probably open. We can see there's, it's turned on or being commanded on, but we'll check that out. And then we'll also check out 1.1, but I'm not expecting that we're going to find any problems with that personally. Probably should explain this. I take it for granted. But what do we expect to see when we're looking at those voltages being graphed? As a general rule, when we're looking at just a standard O2 sensor, we're looking at it on our graph, this being 0 volts, this being 1 volt. When the car is fully warmed up, an upstream oxygen sensor, you're typically going to see it switching from rich to lean. As the fuel trim changes back and forth on the car, trying to keep it at stoichiometric at a air-fuel ratio of whatever it's being commanded at, 14.7 to 1 is probably the ratio on this thing. So this is for an upstream, that's what we would typically see. And then the switch ratio, what you see on the scan tool, might be all over the place like what we were seeing, but that depends on, its points of data received and how often it received them. So looking at it with a oscilloscope, we might see this, a lot smoother transition from rich to lean, where on a scan tool, process data, you're going to see it kind of sketchy like this, particularly on an older vehicle, where it may only be updating every 1 second or so. So, if it receives a data point here and then here, but you didn't see this, you're just going to see a straight line. So if you're looking at just scan data, keep that in mind. Now in the rear O2 sensor, if the converter's working and the car's warmed up, looking at your graph again, this being 1 volt, this being 0 volts, you're typically going to see a pretty steady line in the back. You might see some variations, but as a general rule, this will hold somewhere between, I would say 300 to maybe 700 millivolts. If the converter's hot, if the converter's working, you'll see a pretty steady line there. It gets a little more complicated than that, but as a general rule, when you're just looking at O2 data, upstreams you'll see switch, downstreams, if converter's good and it's hot, that's generally what you'll see. It's a sometimes but not always situation, but on this vehicle, that's what I would expect to see. You can see where we kind of paused that, and that's kind of what we were seeing there. But you can almost see the data points as it collects them, through there. What's up, Mrs. O?
The customer on the phone wanted to know if he could pay you to do specific, doesn't know if it's gonna fix it thing.
I need to pause this. Where were we? I helped out the very lovely Mrs. O. Ew. They look all like the OG. That rear O2 sensor's dripping with oil. You guys can see that. Out in there, I don't know, is that bank 2? Probably. Bank 1, I imagine, is the front one. So that's 2.2. The one back there is soaked with oil. And 1.1. You guys probably can't see, but they're up at the top. Everything appears to be the OG. Actually, they may have been replaced. I see the one's got a case of the twisties. Well, let me poke around here. Oh, I think I see why its brake line's leaking. It's rubbed through on the steering shaft. Let's see if Pretty sure that is. Let's see. See if you guys can see. Oh, focus you. Oh, there we go. See that? See that little circle around the steering shaft and a little green line next to it? Somebody ran a line on it. Rubbed through on the steering shaft, and it goes up to this wheel here. Is that brake fluid? Oh yeah, it's slippery. All right, so it's leaking brake fluid out of that. So we basically just got to redo that line that's already been cobbled in there. And then it's exhaust. So it's leaking back here by the muffler. That's probably that giant hole. That's probably what's up there. Guess things getting ready to fall out of it. Not a big deal. Evap canister barely hanging on. Oh boy. All right, muffler, tailpipe, brake line. And then let me set you down. Yeah, that's probably brake fluid, isn't it? Yes, sir. That's brake fluid. Let's check the resistance on that rear O2. I mean, ultimately, to keep that O2 from going crappy, gotta fix the oil leaks, but it's a Jeep 4.0. Ain't no oil under them. There ain't no oil in them. This is interesting because we know the code set criteria really has nothing to do with the heaters. It's a heater assumption. Typically, when we're looking at heaters, we're gonna come up with an ohm meter right here, ohmage, and we're going to check the resistance of the heater circuit in the O2. And for example here, this is bank 1 sensor 2. We're gonna go on the wires that are the same color, so the 2 white wires in this one. And I just wanted to use this for a known good. And what do we have? We got 5 ohms, 4.9, 5 ohms, 4.9. So that's the resistance of that front heater, which we know it doesn't have an issue with. We're gonna go to the back one here. 2 white wires there. We'll check that one. Heater resistance. And look at that. I'll be dipped, it's the same, 4.9. But we know, well, we know what we know. We know that it's not even looking at the heater circuit, it's looking at the O2 response time. How fast is that O2 heater, or how fast does that O2 heat up and go from 3 volts down to its operating range, which we saw bank 2 sensor 2 not work for a long time, then it kind of worked, and then it, you know, petered back off. I have a lot of experience with older Chryslers and O2 sensors, and these were super failure prone, and that's usually what they did, and that was a customer complaint. They'd start their car up, you'd head down the road with it, and all of a sudden, you know, the car would either fall right on its face or it would start flooding itself out. Smash the gas pedal down, boom, the thing would clear out and away you'd go. And that's because the O2 would stick at a certain voltage, either 900 millivolts or 0 volts. And then as soon as that sucker hit closed loop, you know, it would either take away the fuel or add a whole bunch of fuel, car run like garbage, and then all of a sudden, ta-da, the O2 sensor starts working. That was really common back in the day. So much so, if I heard the symptom, I usually just ordered O2 sensors for it because it was that common. And I assume that's what we have going on here. We're going to verify, however, because we're not big ass oomers, we're gonna make sure that we have power and ground going here. We're gonna have to turn our key on. We'll make sure that we have power and ground going to that rear O2, because that's the one we saw that had the most funny business. And then we'll make the call on that. Of course, you know, both these lower ones are pretty oil soaked. You know, what are you gonna do? Build a little shield over them or fix all the oil leaks, which is prohibitive at best on these. I may be over speaking saying that, but it's probably just most of it's probably pissing out of the valve cover up there. At least slow it down a little bit. Let the customer know what's up. But we're probably looking at just a couple bad O2s, but let's do a couple quick verifications here if we can. You guys see there? Maybe. Engine must not be running. Yes. Okay. I'm turning on the front or the rear O2 heater relay. So we should be able to light this big old honking test light. If If I can get up on this wire here without shorting things out, we don't want to blow a fuse. Come on, baby. Whoa! Scared me. Okay, so there's those two. Can you guys see that light lighting? So that is our front O2, our bank 1 center 2, which that one we don't have any. Oh, never mind, that's bank 2 center. That's the one we have issues with. This one here should also be lit up. I thought I was on one but not the other. And that's going to be these top 2 wires here. So this one should do the same thing, obviously. They run off the same power and ground here, but not to say it can't be broken between here and there. Come on, dude. And you can see this one also lights a 4 amp test light. Okay? So that tells us our power and ground going to that O2 sensor is good. It makes us happy. Okay, that's what we wanted to see there. We have good power, good ground, going to the heater. That's about it. And we can see it in scan data too. So if we turn the actuator on, so we turn on that O2 heater for both the rears, we should watch, the voltage should go right down as that heater heats up. We can see 1, 2 is on its rapid race to the bottom. 2, 2 catching up slowly. We probably could have timed them, but we can clearly see that bank 1 sensor 2 is dropping voltage quite quickly, and 2, 2 is, well, being a little bit sluggish. And the last and final test we can do is we'll unplug 2, 2, even though we already suspicious. Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious. We're going to short out with our test light the signal on the ground wire. We should pull it from 5 volts to ground. If I can get up in here. Not real good at seeing things here. Oops. Oops. You don't want to hear that from your heart surgeon. And there we are. I pulled it to ground through the test light. Take my test light off, back to 5 volts. I'll get my pin back in here, back to ground. So what's that tell us? That tells us that the wire from the PCM to the oxygen sensor is good. We simply have a bad O2. So just what I was doing there. Initially, remember we jumped across the 2 heater wires, we lit up the light, and then the other 2 wires we have left are the signal and the ground. So open current voltage on the, or open circuit voltage is 5 volts on these. But when you jumper the ground to the signal, theoretically what you should see on your scan tool is 0 volts. And I do it through a test light because it's safe instead of just shorting them out. So yeah, I'm gonna make the call on rear O2. Did it fail because it drips oil on it? Hard to say, maybe. But in either case, that O2 is bad. Now you're probably not gonna like this, but the bank 1, sensor 1, I think that was the other one that was going funky. When we were looking at in scan data, I mean, the sucker worked perfect. We started it, it was switching, everything's good there. Experience is gonna tell me that's probably going bad though, based off the code set criteria, and then based off experience. So it would be my suggestion to this fella, do the one that we know is bad under here, and then, you know, if it was me, I would just do the upstream bank 1, sensor 1, 2, because it's likely has stuck at some point and, you know, enough to generate this code. So that's it. That's my diagnosis. Put it in the books. Muffler tailpipe, fix the brake line. I'm gonna call him up, give him an estimate, see what he wants to do. Now we can really see where the brake line's leaking. See where that sucker rubbed through. Look at all the paint peeling off that steering shaft. But let's see, let me see if I can. Wiggle, wiggle. That's the brake line. That's what happens when you let your buddy do it. Or you just don't pay attention. At least they didn't zip tie it to it, that's good. But eventually, he turned his wheel enough to where it rubbed through. But they left the old brake lines in here. Like I say, you can see it's had some. This ain't this old girl's first picnic. The other one runs over here. Yes, sir. Well, this is what it is. We'll do the best job we can, but that's that. Where's this oil leaking from? Valve cover for show. Not much else up here to leak from, but yeah. She's pretty wet. Anyhow. That's it, folks. He said get after it. Everything but the muffler. Don't do the muffler because he knows a guy that can do it way cheaper. Hopefully it's not the same guy that did the brake line. No, he's going to check with a local muffler shop to see if they can do it cheaper in the morning because he wants to try to save a few bucks. And that's that. So then he's going to call us. So I ordered the muffler and tailpipe anyways, just in case he calls and says, yeah, your estimate was good. O2s are coming in the morning. We'll fix the brake line. We got parts for the Honda coming. So that's it. We'll see you in part 2, folks.